Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Jody Lynn, we have a kind of a semi-agricultural theme going on here, right? Because you're on a farm, right? That's about as agricultural as it gets. I run a gardening service, and our guest is a former landscape designer who started a whole landscaping business out of her front lawn, which was a cool thing. We're going to learn more about that. But she's also a business coach, and she's going to have some fascinating things to tell us about it, I'm sure. Her name's Kristan Swan. She's from California, but she's currently connecting to us via Washington, D.C., and we're looking forward to getting to know her. So, Kristan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing so well, thank you, and I'm so excited to be here. So it's good to be talking with you both. And yes, we have just in the couple of minutes we were talking beforehand, we've already identified several similar themes in our lives,
cool.
Right?
Yeah, I love it. It's really good.
I know.
It provides a sense of connection and continuity and feeling like we're kind of coming from the same space, which is really cool. Yeah. So give us a little bit idea of, how you got to where you were today and, how you've gotten to be doing what you're doing, and don't leave out any of the mucky parts because that's the fun stuff.
Yeah. Oh gosh, tell me about it, right? And well, I always joke that I consider myself an experiential learner, which means that I have to do things in order for them to actually stick as lessons, right? And in my case, that means usually multiple times. Right. For some reason, I am just not that person who can learn it once and then it's like, oh, I've got it. Right. I've got to do it again and again and again. And so where I find myself in this moment is actually leaning more into workshop facilitation. So really working with people in person with small groups. And I will go back to the really kind of the origin of this. And it's a very twisty, turny journey. So stop me if you get confused. Sometimes I feel like I need a flow chart, right? And
we can invent one if that would help you. I mean, we can
I know, right? I need those visual aids. Well, and I'm also a visual person, so I always think about it as I'm kind of going through my storytelling in my brain, right? I'm these visual images are popping up, but hopefully my words can create the visuals for everyone here.
That's a good thing. So, if you have this tendency to want to say, as you can see on the screen, remember that 98% of our listeners are audio only, so they won't be able to see.
Right. So I'm gonna be really leaning into that vocabulary that hopefully has been. I'm a voracious reader. I love reading, so hopefully that has rubbed off into how I speak and describe things. But I'm an only child, and I grew up in a fairly. There is a good amount of chaos in my upbringing, and I spent. I'm trying to remember now. Is it, I think, between 0 and 12 years old, I lived in, I think it was 8 or 9 different places.
Wow.
My family is not, they were not active military, so it wasn't a result
that's
of
unusual.
that.
Yeah.
I know, right? I mean, that is the assumption that usually most people make. No, and we were pretty much just moving all within the same, maybe 15-mile radius. So it was all very,
Nice.
And that even though it was still in a fairly small geographic area, the resulting kind of the other thing is that it meant changing schools a lot.
Sure.
And so, so it was a really, it made for, as a child, it made for this kind of longing for consistency and for schedules and as we were joking earlier before we started the recording, that I was saying I'm detail oriented and perhaps a little bit of a control freak, and I think that is certainly a result of this this kind of shifting landscape, literally and figuratively, right, that I grew up in. That being said, one of the real beautiful consistencies in my life were my grandparents. So
Mm.
I had the benefit of grandparents on the East Coast that I visited pretty regularly every summer, and they were the absolute epitome of consistency. They were ended up being married for 73 years.
Woo! Wow.
I know, they were just, they were each other's best friend. They
Mm.
were, deeply respectful and loving towards each other. It was such a gift to be
Mm.
in their presence. They maintained there was, you went grocery shopping on this day of the week. You did this. You ate lunch with, your group of friends on Fridays at this restaurant. And so, I mean, there was this very regular, which I just soaked that up. That was so lovely just for however little bit of time each summer. And I had another grandmother on the West Coast that I saw more regularly who provided stability in a way. She was probably more my partner in crime. She was a little bit of, she did like to get in a little bit of trouble here and there. So we would, but that also, there was a routine to that. I started spending, every Wednesday night at her house, and then I would spend most weekends there. And we definitely had a routine where we would go grocery shopping together and do this and that. So there were these places that provided that consistency for me, and then school. I mean, school was another place that I really did well. Thankfully, school was easy for me, and so that provided a lot of. I probably had an easier time getting to know the teachers because as an only child, and also moving around and being always the new kid, um, I was a lot more adept at relating to adults than I think I
Mm.
was my peers, right? So that, I don't know how much in conjunction with all that, I was very entrepreneurial early. I mean, I remember being, kind of 10 years old, and I think this was kind of some of my hypervigilance around growing up in uncertainty. Is I would notice, oh gosh, I think my neighbors are going on vacation. Why don't I offer to water their plants or take in their mail? And so I always was thinking of, and I think a big part of being entrepreneurial is identifying a need, right, and providing a
Mm.
solution.
Mm.
So I always was kind of noticing those things,
Mm.
and
And
I
it sounds like you also had a particular skill that a lot of people who try to become entrepreneurs, including myself early on, don't have necessarily. You had the ability not just to identify a need, but to identify a need that was actually there rather than one that you perceived might be there.
yes, yes, for sure. I was, yeah, very much leaning into observing, right? I was a great observer. That was a skill that had been honed um, growing up with adults, and I think the other, the the kind of parallel track to this hypervigilance and this observation, however, that was a kind of a less, I mean, it was a survival skill. It was not necessarily one that served me that well as I moved into adulthood, but was one of being being very mindful of not rocking the boat, right?
Mm.
So I'm observing a need, I'm filling that need, but that kind of parallel track is I'm not actually really getting to know who I am, right? I'm a great you know, kind of mirror for other people, but I'm not, it's at the expense of really getting to know myself.
Mm.
And then so much of that other survival skill is really that, becoming invisible when I needed to, right? Or
Mhm.
just being quiet, or, making sure I wasn't asking for too much, or
Mhm.
being too much,
Mhm.
being, not being messy, not being, all those things. And so that, I always think of things, uh, there's always kind of this interesting duality, I feel like sometimes in my life, and in most lives, right? So there's this part of me that's really good at seeing needs and creating solutions, right? And then there's this part of me that's and then there's this hustle that's happening in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit that is always kind of moving forward. Again, there's just this part of myself that's lagging behind, which is like, who am I? What
Mhm.
is it that I really, really, what makes me tick, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, as we were talking about, I worked for some small businesses for a time. I took some time off when I had my kids. I mean, that was like the one thing that I knew that I wanted, was to be
Mm.
a mom. That was the only thing that I was truly sure about.
Mhm.
So that was wonderful and amazing and incredibly hard. If everyone who's been a parent out there, or I mean, it still is, as a parent of young adults, there still are big challenges to parenting, and I love being a parent. Um, so I think, one of I was mentioning the landscape design career really evolved from this, doing this thing in my messy backyard, and the work being admired by friends and neighbors, and them then asking me to do the same at their yard. And
Mm.
eventually I was like, well, gosh, let's make a business out of this. And I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. And I was incredibly busy. I mean, I had no shortage of clients. And there was certainly a time when I was, you know, not making any money. If anything, probably losing money, if I'm
Easy to
pain,
do in the field, by the way. That's not a hard thing to
painfully
do in
honest.
landscaping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, always figuring, experiential learner, right? So I'm continuing to gather information, and I am making improvements. And so my landscape business went through several iterations. There was a time when I was in partnership with a landscape contractor. There were times when, my focus was more on kind of project management. So all these different things, and really, um, a lot of good work being done, and it was enjoyable. And when I started to be more actively in conversation with other designers and people in the field, landscape architects, I was meeting these people who were so wildly talented. I mean,
Mm.
just really, I always joke that my biggest selling point or skill was that I could get things done, right? I would not
Not a
leave
bad
my
one at all.
clients.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And especially in any kind of construction, field, right? I always would say that I would never leave my clients with a punch list, right? I
Mhm.
would I would get it all done, and I would not disappear, right? I
Mm.
mean, I think most of us maybe have had a project where that person kind of disappears and there's still
Yep.
things to be done. So that was not me. And I was meeting these people though who were so, I mean, their work was so gorgeous, and just in their in the just the depth of knowledge they had in the plant material, or the, the soil biology, or just all these things, and their businesses were just, kind of a hot mess. And so I, this is a to your earlier point of creating solutions and for things that people want versus or a perceived need, right? This was kind of one of those funny mixes of, you know, thinking to myself, well, I'm I'm going to become a business coach, and I'm going to coach all of these amazing professionals and assist them in getting their businesses kind of to match or in alignment with their talent, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
I mean, what you're
I,
talking about doesn't surprise me, by the way. And for listeners who may not know what I'm talking about, it's a very common thing. I mean, obviously, I tend to work specifically with gardeners rather than landscapers more broadly, but it's also going to be true of landscapers as well. People who go into gardening, people who go into landscaping, more often than not, don't have a lot of business skill. What they have is the ability to work in the field, to do the work that is like you're describing, the creative work, the beautiful work, the work that just
Mhm.
amazes and so forth. Where they kind of fall off is because it's because it's an entirely different skill set, is how do you make the budgets work? How do you make the payroll work? How do you make the accounting work? How do you do the scheduling? How do you handle all that? That's the part that falls apart, which is why my company doesn't have any competition. We don't compete with landscapers. We just compete with gardeners, and there's none. There's no gardening competition because the gardeners don't know how to run a business. The only reason that we do is this business was originally started by my ex-wife, who was a gardener. I was the business
Mhm.
guy, and when she ran into a problem
Mhm.
with the business, I came in and worked the business part, and so it worked beautifully because of that. And then when we split up, I bought her out, and oddly now she works for me in the company that she originally started. But
Oh,
it shows how this funny stuff can work. But if you don't have that kind of thing going on, and you're somebody who is that creative type, who loves working with his or her hands in the field, in the mud, in the dirt, doing all that stuff, chances are you don't have that other skill set.
Mhm.
So what you're talking about is a
well,
big deal. It's one that occurs a lot.
Mhm.
yes, it definitely occurs a lot. And I also, what I eventually noticed, because it was funny, because I see this need, right? And once I start approaching people and saying, here I'm here to help you,
Mhm.
right? And I the people that I immediately thought that would hire me wanted nothing to do with me. So
Yeah, yeah.
I was so excited, because in my head I was like, I am going to work with primarily women. I'm working with these wonderful creatives, and I am going to assist them to just, you know, really grow their business in a way that you know is a testament to their talent,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And it was a little, not just, it was more than a little. It was kind of soul crushing to to have a very genuine um, desire to serve this group of people, uh, and that they didn't see what I was doing as having any value. And it
Mm.
was interesting. I think that there was a lot of feeling that it was, number one, an expense, not an
Hmm.
investment,
Hmm.
right? And that it was somehow it was going to take too much time, right? Or that it
Oh
was
yeah.
going to, and so I had to pivot, because I was pretty committed at this point to doing the business
Mm.
coaching. I mean, what I realized in the course of all these different kinds of things that I did is that, the thing that I love doing is I don't have a very industry specific love. What I have is I have a love of supporting people in their success.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, whether that was working the design work that I did, either for landscapes or for even interior work that I did as well, that in and of itself was kind of a form of that, of supporting my clients in creating these successful spaces that were
Mhm.
these wonderful places for them to relax or entertain or whatever their kind of
Right.
their desire was, right?
Mhm.
And then, and prior to that, I had managed a children's toy and bookstore, and so much of that was really assisting, the clients and also my little team of people that I was managing. So as I moved into business coaching, this was probably the most obvious translation of that desire to support people and kind of guide them towards success. And one of the things that I'm always very uh, that I realize is like a word like success is one of those words that I call wallpaper words, right? And that's those words that we use so commonly that it's literally like wallpaper, right? And so one of the things that I would start with doing when I finally did start getting clients is I would say, we need to define these words for you
And before
because
you go further with that, there's something I want to zero in on, because you mentioned how
yeah,
you really weren't hitting the right market, and this is a big deal
right.
for anybody who's ever tried to do something entrepreneurial. I mean, we have the same thing with the gardening business. Literally, when we started, we thought our best clientele were going to be the wealthy people with the big landscapes who need us to come in. No, they're actually the worst customers. They're not the ones you want at
Yeah.
all. The ones we want were the ones with minimal, not tiny needs, but moderate needs. Moderate means,
Mhm.
and the ones who've been doing it themselves for years, which was not what we expected. Not what we
Yeah.
expected at all. So we had to learn to pivot to that. First of all, we had to find what it was. That was
Right.
quite a bit of doing to find that out. And then once we found it, then we had to figure out how to pivot over to it, because it was a different set of needs.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm curious, in
Yeah.
your case, I mean, you already had in mind what your ideal client was likely going to be, and it turned out to not be that one. How did you find who your ideal client was?
Yeah. Well, a lot of experiential learning. So
Mm,
a lot of missteps and doing, as you were saying that, I'm having these flashes of, you know, oh gosh, I mean, oh boy, like I'm reducing my pricing, right? So I'm thinking,
mm,
okay,
got it.
because I'm still trying at the beginning, I'm still trying to fit with the people
Mhm.
that in my head that I thought I
Right.
was going to fit with, right?
Right.
So one of the
Yeah.
big
Right.
objections that they
Do
keep
whatever it
telling
took.
me,
It was
Yeah.
yeah,
whatever you
is
had to
that
do, you would just do it, right?
it's too expensive. So I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
I'm lowering my price,
Yeah.
which doesn't really do
Mm.
anything, right?
Well, it makes you
Except
poor.
for, yeah, I was going to
It
say,
does that part
except
really
makes you
well. I mean,
broke. Yeah, makes you broke, and slowly over time can also, you know, make you a little grumpy or
a
resentful.
little.
Um, yeah,
A
yeah.
lot.
And so, I I continue to reach out to people in the landscape industry. What I did notice is men were willing to hire me, which I had
Mhm.
not really thought. I mean, about so ended up working with a lot more landscape architects, just because of the way the gender falls out in that, and in this time that I was doing it, this was quite a at least, gosh, more than a decade ago.
Mhm.
um, and contractors, so
Mhm.
landscape contractors,
Mhm.
uh, and then a funny thing, joining a networking group, and I'm a horrible networker. um, but it was one of these groups where like you have to get up and say your thing or
Yeah.
whatever. And so what I found is the thing that I had seen, and you touched on this, Walt, is I had seen that people who did their thing, um, had this zone of genius in this realm of whether it was landscape design, interior design. It also was is kind of the same thing within the wellness space. People
Mm.
who were um, doing coaching in wellness had studios, exercise studios, or different services. So a lot of people or even people who were doing advising, so financial advising, or in the insurance industry, things like that. Um, so they had this particular professional service that they were so good at, and the business part is sometimes where like things they it got messy for them.
Jody
So
Lynn is sitting over
that's,
there. I don't know if you realize this, but she's sitting over there and nodding to herself because she knows exactly what you're talking about, right,
you
Jody
know what
Lynn?
I'm talking about.
100%. Yes.
You got to
Yeah,
tell her what your background, because we talked about the fact that you have the horses, but you didn't tell her what your actual background is.
right.
No, I've been in financial services for about 15 years now. And then I have a coaching company as well. So you're right in my wheelhouse. I'm
Yeah,
following you there. And it's so true that you can get the skill or acquire the skill, develop the skill, whatever, of talking to people and even presenting or understanding or
hmm
all of these different things to make you good at what you do. But I also noticed that, especially in the financial industry, everybody's a contractor or self-employed. And
yeah,
our company that I was with, it has a lot of really great training. But even then, people still didn't understand how to run a business. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. And so from that, I realized that I was really, the people that I could help the most were people who were generally business founders and owners, people who had been in business for at least 5 years, so that we had some information to actually they had a level of experience, and there was an amount of data that we could go through to be thinking about. They had success, and they had kind of plateaued,
Mhm.
right? So they were people that at this point were stuck, um, and they were, these people who were very good at the thing that they did.
Right.
And so, from that, I um, was able to really have a lovely coaching practice. And eventually I did get some landscape designers
Well,
to
good. Yeah, I
come
mean,
on
you had some
over.
people in
Yeah.
there too.
No, it wasn't a complete bust. And
But I'm just finding
I,
it fascinating. I mean, you end up in the same space that Jody Lynn is in, but she kind of went a different direction because she came in through the space directly. She's working within it. And then she realizes that she's got stuff to share that other people, not necessarily in her space, but people perhaps on the client side of her space, or people who are related to the business. So again, the same kind of moving through one field to find the next field, because that's the way her coaching business worked was different from the way her financial services business worked.
yeah,
You have to,
yeah.
my point is, you have to kind of follow what reality is bringing to you, what the universe is bringing to you.
And not get
Oh, for
stuck.
sure.
Like it's really hard to make that pivot and not feel like a failure or like,
Mm.
oh man, like even on the coaching side, I've noticed a huge difference. Like I was really great, or I am really great at the financial side of things, and even the business building side of things there. It's very easy for me to make money. But I've noticed that there's a different mentality that I have about coaching, whether it comes to like who's going to buy this or how is this going to land for people, or what the ideal client is that I had in my head and what they think is worthy of paying, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly for, it's it's interesting the different times, you know, because I mean, when I, you know, if I were to list my, you know, I was in the restaurant industry for a while. I've worked at art galleries and, you know, the children's toy and bookstore. I worked for a
Wow.
union for a while as a business agent. You know, I've had these different businesses, you know, and it's so funny because someone from the outside, and I've had people just flat out say this to me. They're like, well, like, I don't get what you do, and I don't, what is like, and what does this mean? Like that it's, I mean, clearly the implication, whether from their body language or just their actual language is poof. Like this is so, I mean, talk about messy and strange, and this doesn't make any sense to me. And there's no way that you must feel remotely successful, you
Interesting.
know.
Very interesting. And I get that because unless you've actually lived through it, you don't really see how the connecting threads actually connect. I mean,
Mhm.
for
I
you,
know.
in your experience, all of the threads connect. That's one of the most fascinating things to me, that you can have a very disparate career leading up to a point where you end up in coaching or podcasting or whatever else you're doing. And somehow all of the different pieces feed into it in ways that you would have never expected. But
Yeah.
trying to get somebody else to understand that, forget it. You can barely explain it to yourself, let alone to somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also a big part of that, and this was one of the kind of something that I feel like was a real strength that I was able to bring into my coaching practice was when I initially started doing landscape design, you know, here I am, I'm kind of by default making this business, and it's I you know, I don't, I have my degree from I have a, you know, at that point in time I had graduated from a 4-year college, and I had a fine art degree, and I had a geography degree. Again, those totally made sense to me at the time, you know, when I was there at school. And in part, you know, again, this through line for me, the reason why, you know, here I was going to do this fine art trajectory, and, you know, I'm going along. And then I take a course in the geography department, which is probably like a, you know, one of those core curriculum courses. I went to a liberal arts college, so and I just fell in love with this crazy cast of characters in the geography department. And I was like, I got to figure out how to spend more time with these people because they are just like, it was a tiny department. I think there was maybe 6 professors in it, and they were just, I mean, yeah, you could not make up a more wild bunch of just interesting real characters. And
Mm.
so I'm like, I got to figure out how to, I got to add a major. And I did. And even I was able to kind of like figure out a way, because you, as a fine art major, you had to do this final body of work, and it, and then you showed it, you actually hosted a show. And so I kind of conceived of this way to introduce um, space and place into my body of work.
Uh,
And that's and that's also how I was able to kind of get I did for part of my senior year for this body work, I figured out how to go back to Southern California and do some work during the winter, get out of the winter months. And so, you know, I was always um, in my head again. I mean, I didn't feel like I was forcing these connections, but I did have to learn how to describe them to others. because especially in the academia, right, it had to make some sort of sense for them
Yeah, somewhere
to,
along the line, you have to kind of develop your elevator speech, as they call it. You have to find
yeah.
some way to shorten it down to one thing that you could say while you're talking to somebody in an elevator. And when you have so many disparate things going on, that's
Oh gosh,
challenging.
I have the worst. I know.
You
I
have the
am
worst
not a
elevator
good
speech.
I have the worst elevator. I'm like, oh gosh, can we go up and down and up and down and up and down? Because then maybe I can get maybe just, a quarter of my elevator speech out. So, but
Jody Lynn, did you ever have any success building your elevator speech? I never really asked you about that, but I'm kind of curious.
I mean, I think on the coaching side, it's a little more difficult because it's a deeper conversation. So I coach about abundance and our relationship to money and it's something that, you kind of had spoken to a little bit earlier that we haven't defined these wallpaper terms. So like success and money and the things that we're driving towards are sometimes societal beliefs or pressures, and we just get
yeah.
caught up in that storm. So I find like that I'm not as good with the elevator speech on the coaching side of things, but I had it nailed with the financial side of things. But it was more of like I was taught to do like a disturb and intrigue or whatever. So I'd be at random barbecues and I'd be like, hey, did you know that, this account is fully taxable when you die? It's like you took it all out that day. Did you know that? And people are like, what? And then I'd walk away and they'd be like, no, wait, come back. All right, great. And then I could have the up and down conversation of the elevator because now they're like, no, don't leave. I want you to tell me. So I would just say things that would like shock and awe people of like, I never heard that. What are you talking about?
So you figured out how to get them to push the button to close the elevator door.
Exactly.
Gosh, I know. You are my hero.
Well, thank you.
are
But
my
only on that
absolute
side
hero.
of things. Because I know that there's a great need for the education around finance, but there's also a lot of like raw emotion. People are, pissed off at the banks and they're pissed off about their financial situation or whatever, that they never got that education. They don't really understand. So when you hit them with like a hot button that gets them like, what? The day I die, everything's deemed disposed, like this account. And it's like I used all of that money. That's my final tax return. Yeah, that's right. And it would piss people off. So they want to say more. What do you mean? How do you figure it out? What do you do instead? So they would be like following me around different parties because I was able to push a button with them. And I was good at that. I'd be like, okay, I'd welcome the conversation. And I'm sure that you could do that with all industries. I just never figured out the right language.
Well, gosh, I mean, I just feel like because so much of my work right now really is around this concept of story, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of think of these three big buckets. I think of the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that have been told to us or that we've inherited, and then the stories that we choose to share with others, right? And that's always, and, I'm listening, and I mean, your money story, right? I mean, hits all of those pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, it does.
So, I mean, that is, everyone has that, I mean, they have the stories that they tell themselves about money, right? I mean, they have their inherited or the stories that are being told to them, the societal stories, and then what are they choosing to share?
Absolutely.
That's a big deal. That's a very big deal because we as human beings need to have that kind of structure in order to make sense out of what it is we're talking about. And that's on both sides of the coin. I mean, we're talking here about how important it is to be able to communicate to somebody else with the idea that we're trying to find a client, but it's on the client side too. They need to be able to do the same thing. And like you both were alluding to, it's not a common skill. It's a skill you have to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you don't go into some sort of an entrepreneurial field, it's going to be much harder to learn it because what are your opportunities going to be? Maybe the next time you ask for a raise, that's about the only one I can think of. There aren't a whole lot of them where you get to just go out there and try to make your elevator pitch because you don't have a need for one. So when you actually find yourself needing one, like, well, I don't know how to do that.
I don't even know how to
What do I
go
do
up
next?
to people and talk to them. That's another big thing is like, how do I even find somebody to talk to? And for me in the financial side of things, when I first started in the business, I was really, really, really shy. And I actually made a commitment to myself because I can be outgoing and funny and, you know, everything. And I have a brother who I'm really close with in age, and we were really close at that time, especially. But he was like the funny guy, and everybody loved him, and like larger than life, and everything like that. So I had this story of like, we can't both be that way, that we can't, which I see now as ludicrous. But when I entered into financial services, he wasn't a part of that world. It was just me. And so I literally walked through the doors and I made a commitment that I was going to be outgoing and courageous and all of these things that I really wanted to be. And when it came to talking to people, I don't know whether it was just, you know, I was 26 years old and I was in a tight spot and I needed this to work. And so I just became fearless or I don't know what it was, but I was crazy, like crazy. I would play a game with one of my friends where we would walk in the mall. We were both in the business trying to, you know, prospect people or whatever. And we would push each other. And I mean, like physically, like you go now and you pick one person and you push them in that direction. You have to go talk to them. So I had to talk to a police officer writing a ticket. I even like in an automated car wash, like when you're waiting in line for the automated car wash, I started checking it out the first time, but I gathered a bunch of like stuff from my car, like garbage or whatever, typical lady, just throwing water bottles back there, you know, whatever. I got there's some water bottles or whatever, some garbage. And I'm like, okay, there's a garbage can right beside where he is in line in an automated car wash. And it's winter. So Canadian winter, it's cold. It's cold. So I grab my stuff and I go to the garbage bin that's right beside him. And then I turn and I look and he's looking at me and I like wave and smile, totally chicken out. Go back to my car. Like, you can't chicken out. You've got to go. Like you made a promise that you're going to talk to that guy. You didn't talk to him while you're in the store and he was behind you. You could have, but you didn't. Now you went to the garbage once. Like, he's going to think you just have a really dirty car. So I went back to my car and instead of sitting down, I grabbed some more things, like anything that I could find that looked like garbage. And I went and I put it in the garbage can and I turned and again, he was looking and I waved and he literally rolled his window down and I prospected him. Like I said whatever the script was at the time that I had in my head and whatever. And I actually got his phone number. He never became a client. He never came to work with me or anything like that. But crazy story that I was just willing to do whatever it took. But most people that would come into that industry, into that business specifically, I would tell that story or talk about those things. And they're like, you're just crazy. You're just special. You're just more confident than I am. No, I was scared shitless. I wasn't confident before. I was just willing to put myself out there because it didn't matter at the end of the day, like, what's this guy going to do? No, I don't give up my phone number. No, I'm not interested. Okay, cool. I'm not going to die. It's okay. But at least I tried, and that built my confidence. But I noticed that there was a huge struggle in that work in that industry of people who were like, I don't know who to talk to. I was relentless in that way. And I think that really helped me gain confidence, but also that business acumen of like, how do you talk to people? How do you start the conversation? How do you keep it going? How do you develop a relationship with somebody that's brand new?
And by the way, as you were describing that, it occurred to me, there's an example of something that crosses over outside of business realm.
Yeah.
Because you were describing how difficult it is to go up to somebody you don't know and start a conversation, which is exactly what many single males have trouble doing if they're trying to, they see a single, what they hope is a single female, and they want to try to approach her and try to get a conversation going. And it terrifies many of us. I mean, there's some guys who they just can just do it. It's not a big deal. But for most of us, it's the same kind of syndrome that you were describing. Like, oh my God, I can't talk to that person.
Yeah.
What if she accuses me of rape? What if some horrible thing happens? I get arrested for harassment or something.
Yeah, it's very, I was listening or reading something recently, and it was talking about, kind of what, when you are approaching someone, and regardless of gender, but just kind of how do you get over that initial um, fear,
Oh yeah.
and it was saying, the suggestion was, you don't really have to come in hot, so to speak. You don't have to have a big whatever. Like, it's okay just to come up and say, hi, my name is
Yes.
Kristan,
Yes.
right?
How are you?
And
Yeah.
how are you, right?
Yeah.
And
And what you're touching on is important, because, and this happens particularly with single men, but it happens in other areas too. We feel like we have to have the end result in mind, and if we don't get the end result,
right.
we failed, and
Yeah.
that's not the
Yeah.
truth.
No, it's not the truth. And it just is, and we put so much pressure on ourselves to, to be this, I don't know, to be smart or funny or whatever. And when, you know, just being human, right, can be, is absolutely enough.
Yes. Yeah. But, well, not only is it enough, it's also a descriptor of how we feel about ourselves. You have to
Yeah.
feel good about
Yeah.
yourself in order to be able to do something like this, to at least some degree. If you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to make that. I mean, you're going to do what Jody Lynn the first time did. You're just going to say, "Okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm going back to the car. I just can't handle this anymore."
Yep.
Yeah, and I was mentioning that one of the kind of key lessons that I learned from my own uh, journey as a business owner, particularly when I had the landscape design business, is I that I was able to translate into a great kind of teachable moment in my coaching practice, was when I started my landscape design business. I had this very, and I think a lot of it came from just a lack of confidence,
Mm.
and but I had this thought that there were these distinct, like there was professional Kristan, and then there was personal Kristan, and you have got to
Oh,
just, like, the two shall never meet, right? I
yeah.
mean, that you've got to be, you know, this, that, and the other thing when you are professional Kristan, and don't let any of that personal side kind of leak in,
So,
right? And
total
eh,
compartmentalization.
Yeah.
oh, total. And also, I think that was, again, that compartmentalization, it was such a survival skill that I was
Sure.
adept at from,
Yeah.
from growing up. And it was, the thing that I learned is I had much more fun and success in my business when I realized that I was a whole person,
Mm.
right? And that didn't mean, I know that there has been some conversation around, oh, bring your whole self to work or whatever, and then it's like, oh, well, gosh, whoa, we don't want your whole self.
Mm.
We just want the whole self that fits into our idea of what your whole self should be.
Mm.
And so I think there's some nuance here, I guess, that I want to highlight, but I do think that by it's so, it was, and especially in the work that I was doing, it was okay to say, you know, that I had kids, or that this is
Mm.
what I was, that I had traveled someplace, or that I had, I felt like there was, like, oh gosh, they just, don't let anything that is just not about the project. And I think that it was when kind of more of my whole self was showing up that like I said, it was way more fun for me. And in turn, I think I just became more, you know, accessible for the client and to work with. And, and that was, you know, as a coach to business owners, you know, so often I would have a client, and a lot of times there was a gender, it kind of fell along gender lines. I had female clients who kind of had that similar
Mm.
feeling that they had to do that distinction of
Yeah.
their personalities
Yeah.
in their work. And, you know, it's like, yeah, especially when you're a business owner and you're in you know, an independent business owner, you know, how your personal life is it's related to how
Mm.
well you're doing in
Yeah.
business. And I think that is, I have this journal. It's called Spaghetti on the Wall
I was just gonna bring that up. It sounded like it
that
was
I,
perfect
yeah,
right in. We got
I
to talk
know.
about this.
So, well, because you know, here I am, I'm working with my business owners, and I'm listening, and we're talking, and over time, I'd be working with folks, and it actually didn't take that long, but I'd be listening to and recognizing these patterns. You know, it always started with you know, they'd come to me with an issue or a question or a problem,
Mm.
right? And then we'd kind of unpack it a little bit, and I'm like, okay. And then as I am getting to know them, I'm like, okay, so we've got, you know, there's definitely some patterns going on here.
Mhm.
So part of Spaghetti on the Wall was to create a journal that has prompts and basically guides you kind of through in this journaling process in order to, what I used to say was, develop a habit of discernment.
Mm.
And part of what I meant by that was, you know, get curious about yourself, kind
Mm.
of recognize, gain some awareness around your patterns, and one of the big places for my business owners was decision making, right? I mean, what are those patterns around decision making that you have? And I I joke that, you know, I say that this was all inspired by this need, right? That I was this external need that I was witnessing amongst my
Mm.
clients. And of course, this was, you know, I was right in the midst of my second marriage, which was not a happy place.
Mm.
And you know, I had basically had had not really processed the grief over the demise of my first marriage,
Mm.
and with whom I shared three children, and had moved into this second marriage with, still, you know, hadn't really gotten curious about my decision making, about who I was,
Mm.
right? I mean, I've been really good at just hustling along and creating businesses and doing all these things, but I had still very little idea of who I was at this moment. And I you know, Spaghetti on the Wall is one of, and it's a really, and I'm laughing a little bit because I've returned to Spaghetti on the Wall in a very active way recently, and meaning that I always have maintained a journaling practice, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to go back to the actual Spaghetti on the Wall and do the prompts as they are, because I kind of do them loosely in my regular
Mm.
journaling practice. And about 5 days straight into it, I was laughing because I was like, wow, this really works. This is so great. And, which is funny when you're talking about your own thing, but it's
Right.
like, gosh, yes, it does. And I never think about my coaching practice or even the small group workshops that I facilitate now. Like, I am not about wanting to change people.
Mm.
Because that's not really up to me.
No.
That's not up to me. What I can do is I can, and this, I mean, this is only for people who are open to it, is I can provide tools and a space for gaining some awareness,
Mm. Yeah, that's
right?
important.
And that's, I think, the place where we can learn and grow from.
Yeah, well, that's where the journaling process is going to be very powerful, because it's going to enable you to
Yeah,
focus in a way that you would not normally focus in your everyday life. That's what those prompts that
yeah,
you were talking about are really doing. I'm sure when you got
right.
excited about your own prompts that you created, is that
I know, I
they were
know.
guiding you to focus in on what you really wanted, what was really important, what you valued, all that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
that's where the rubber meets the road. It really is.
exactly. Exactly.
We're
So,
we're we're running out of time, and unfortunately, that means we have to kind of draw it to a close. But we have a few things we'd like to do before we do that. First and foremost, for somebody who wants to work with you, or maybe they want to find out about spaghetti on the wall and how all that works, we got to direct them. How do we find the way to Kristan Swan?
well, the best way is you can visit the website. So there is kristanswan.com. And on there, you can find ways to contact me. Spaghetti on the Wall is available for purchase, and kind of current workshops are up there. And also, you can just reach out to me directly.
All right, that's good. Second thing I like to
Yeah.
do is I like to go to Jody Lynn, who is, I mean, you've already got a sense of what she's like, but when you get to know her over the years, you find out she's really, really good at this stuff. I don't know if you noticed, she's also a consummate note taker. She was taking notes throughout
Hmm.
everything that you said there, because that's the level of detail that she uses to do her version of that focus in, that really grab what's going on. And as a result, she's really good at summarizing what happened. So Jody Lynn, what happened today? What was the stuff that you say is the takeaway?
Oh man, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the reminder that our path is never really linear, and that a lot of times, well, when I look back at all the different, left turns or right turns or crosses in the road that I've had, I can see how each one of them was a building block to get me here. And I'm so grateful for this moment. But I think this conversation was that reminder that you're never really lost or off track. You're always on time, that it's always happening for a reason or for this greater good, and that the beauty of the journey truly will prevail. And I think that's such a beautiful message and such a beautiful reminder for everybody today. So thank you, Kristan.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with your summary. Thank you for saying that all so beautifully.
Yeah, she's really good at it. I mean, she does it beautifully every time. It's an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Final thing I like to do with every show, something I started a few years ago. I have an IT background. That's where my own career path. I mean, to be running a gardening service seems absolutely bizarre, but that's where I ended up. But the point is that with that IT background, I'm also very cognizant of what happened over the last 25 years, 30 years or so, the rise of the internet, the fact that we can do this kind of a conversation here. I mean, you're in DC, I'm in Connecticut, she's up in Alberta, Canada. It's like we're in the next room. I mean, it's something that was 30 years ago impossible. Today, we take it for granted. It's nothing. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
We have the social media. We have all the different ways that people are able to create courses and self-publish and all this kind of stuff. And then they do podcasts with us to share the information, and people are picking up on this stuff, and they do YouTubes, and it's like, whoa, oh my God, there's this major explosion of stuff going out there. And in the process of doing all of that, we're sharing stuff. I mean, you're sharing the skills that you've learned over the years, the ideas, the concepts, the great takeaways. You're sharing them with the public that you most cases never met, never saw, never
Right.
will know. And that's where I noticed there's a gap that didn't exist 30 years ago, because we don't get credit for that. So, Kristan, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about just by sharing all this stuff, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you so much. Well,
Yeah.
and thank you for your part in bringing this message and other messages out into the world.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's
Well,
very
we love it. It's
appreciated.
fun. Yeah.
Mhm.
So thank you much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on Elevate Today. Goodbye, everybody.